Okay, so this video is going to do really poorly because it will just be like this talking unedited video. But I'm doing it anyway because for the last couple of weeks I've been having this abstract philosophical thought and it keeps telling me that I need to get this out, and I've been resisting it, but it just keeps nagging at me. You know, I just want to be in my niche doing guitar videos in my comfort zone. But yeah, I guess I'll do this video and delete it in a week just so I can get the peace of mind that at least I tried. But anyway, the concept is that lack of contrast creates misery. And the opposite of that would be that life emerges through contrast. So just to establish this concept, and I will use this concept to apply it to something that's related to this channel and this niche, but just to establish this concept, for example, how is life created? It's like created through this balance and union of different opposite forces, right? And that's from a broader perspective, but also like, how was this day created? It was created by the sun going up and eventually the sun goes down, and then you have this contrast there which creates what we call a day. And if you're at, for example, Lofoten, then we have this situation where the sun never go down, for example, and then we try to block out the light artificially to simulate that we have the sun going up and down. And if you don't manage to do that, then I think you can agree that life starts to become quite visible if you like never block out the light at all. And if you try to use this concept in, for example, guitar playing, like if you have someone that is really good at shredding the guitar really fast, it's really impressive at first, but if that's all that you're doing, then it becomes uninteresting. And you know, why is that? And I believe here we can use this concept that at first it's interesting because it's something new, it's a contrast for what you're used to perhaps, but if that's all you're doing and you never slow down and create an interesting melody or have an interesting effect or have an interesting interaction with what the bass is doing, you know, you just don't listen and just shred, then yeah, what you're doing is that you're not creating contrast. So over time it becomes boring or perhaps even miserable. So that's one example. And another example relates to that today I listened to this radio show, the Swedish radio show, which are doing like documentaries on different bands, and they had an episode on the Chili Peppers, and there they kind of went through the story of how Anthony got started and the history of the Chili Peppers, mostly from Anthony's perspective. And in there, at least the reporter stated that Anthony has claimed he isn't like the most skillful singer, and I guess we can include John here as well. You know, when it comes to his guitar playing, there's still like this debate: is he overrated or not? And I believe that people have this confusion about this because they don't really see this concept at play here. Because if you are to be a good musician, you need to be able to balance these two different opposite forces of music. But what are those? Well, the claim is that, for example, Kiedis isn't a skillful singer, or that John's playing isn't as technical. You know, there are a lot of other people on YouTube, for example, not me, but other skillful guitarists that can play way more advanced, that just get a fraction of the attention, and then people think, you know, he's overrated, John, and all that. So what people are doing there is that they are focusing on one side of it, and I would call that side, you know, being good at manipulating the external world in your craft. Like, for example, if you're a singer, you are good at manipulating or using your vocal cords, which is something external at the end of the day, to create cool sounds. And if you're a guitarist, you're good at manipulating the guitar strings and all that to create cool sounds and effects and all that. And perhaps at the computer you're good at processing audio, you know that craft, you know what knobs to turn and all that. And people think that it seems like people have this expectation that the more skillful you are at that craft, the better you should be, and this should be this linear scale. And people seem to be frustrating that is not how the universe is designed, because it's designed by this concept of contrasts. So what is the opposite force of being externally good at manipulating the external world through your craft, like guitar playing? What's the opposite of that? Well, I would argue that the opposite of that external is the internal. To have this internal world that you want to express to the rest of the world. And I believe those are like quite opposite, because when you practice the guitar, for example, you need to just sit alone for many hours in your room and just practicing, and it can be quite tedious, and you just need to repeat scales and all that. But then on the other side of it, then you need to be able to, for example, be on stage in front of thousands of people and just go wild and being really expressive and use all the skills that you learned over here. And those are like complete different energies. And as human beings, we usually like to get comfortable being in one place or the other. Like if you're starting to become like really technically skilled, you can become comfortable in that, but you don't really dare to put yourself out there and going wild on stage, for example. But on the other hand, if you're just doing the other thing over here, for example, you have so much to express and you're put on stage into thousands of people with a guitar, but you have never played the guitar before, then you will get a complete disaster as well. And what I believe is so special with, well, a lot of musicians, but for example with the Chili Peppers and Anthony and John and all that, is that I believe they are really good at balancing this balance of expressing something internally, having something they want to express, and being good at their craft. And I believe when I listen to Anthony's story, it sounds like he really had a lot he wanted to express, and he didn't really know how to do it. So it was kind of like he with singing, it kind of felt like he jumped over the cliff and learned to fly along the way, really. So over time I think he has become a quite skillful singer anyway, and he's really creative to be able to build on his unique strength. I think that's a good use of this concept for this topic, to again balance the internal world of wanting to express something and the external world being good at your craft, and I guess we can apply this to a more broader concept as well of like why it's impossible for anyone or the Chili Peppers to be in their prime, because I think we can all agree that the Chili Peppers aren't what they used to be like 20-30 years ago, but I think that's kind of by design of the universe, really, because again, when I listened to this documentary, it was quite clear to me that what the Chili Peppers were doing back then wasn't something that was what everyone else was doing in the music industry. It was like something completely new that they developed, and it was kind of hard to categorize their genre. It kind of became their own genre. And the reason I think it becomes so successful is that they invested so much time into this new genre, and that is quite scary to do because you have no idea how it will be received. But they invested so much time into this over many years, and what they ended up with was something really, really unique on the market. And that uniqueness creates a contrast which breeds this life energy and joyful energy into the music industry, and then they become popular. And if someone wanted to replicate that, then it will take many years for them to reach the same skill level within that genre, and by that time that genre is not interesting anymore, because then it's just the same thing, there's no contrast. But now when the Chili Peppers are in their prime and they have made a couple of albums within that niche, then what do they do then? I hear this debate that Stadium Arcadium is like too soft and not what it used to be, but I think it's a quite silly debate, because you can't just repeat the same thing over and over. What was successful in the 90s doesn't become, or it doesn't mean that it will keep being successful as the years pass. You can't just create the same album over and over with the same energy. You kind of need to reinvent yourself in order to create contrast and to create something interesting. And then you perhaps could think that you can reinvent yourself and do like a complete 180 to create the largest possible contrast, and perhaps that would be a contrast in the external world, in the music industry, like for example if they were doing hip-hop or metal or something completely different. But then you're kind of at this position I talked about before, you're this person wanting to express so much, and you have a guitar in your hands but you have never played the guitar. It becomes a mess. You're not skilled externally in that new field, even though internally you might be excited you're doing this 180, but it won't be well received because you haven't been able to put in these 10,000 hours into this new thing, and you're not learning as fast as when you're young. So you can't do the 180, you can't do the same thing, because both of those creates this problem with contrast just from different levels. So what I believe the Chili Peppers have done is to kind of reinvent themselves, like building on their strength, but trying to do something new with their unique strength. But it will still have elements to what we've heard before. So even if they successfully reinvent themselves, it will be really hard to have as strong of an impact as you had in your prime, because the contrast isn't as stark as it was back then. So I believe that is why it's impossible to be in your prime all the time. So this concept of creating contrasts kind of makes life complicated, because the Chili Peppers in their prime really appreciated musicians, but they fall into this trap of not being able to create these contrasts. But that makes life complicated, but it also makes life interesting, because then that opens up for a younger person who has the his or her unique strength that he can build on, and there are like these new tools, and then this person can create something completely new that gets even more well received than the Chili Peppers who kind of start to go down, for example. Even though you're super skilled in your craft, it doesn't mean that the world isn't open for new people to express themselves and being able to reach out to people. And that's just in the example of music. So I think this concept really applies to everything, and that really makes life really nuanced. Again, it can apply to something simple as the sun going up and down, darkness and lightness, but it can also be applied to more nuanced things, like for example, anxiety levels seems to rise in the world, and a lot of people go through this life of feeling like there's something wrong just in their gut internally, but they can't really put a finger on what it is, and it can perhaps feel like a bug in the design of life and the universe. But I also think that it actually can be a feature where your inner self, your soul, if you will, is trying to tell you that you need to figure out what step you need to take that is like the opposite of what you're doing, but in a resourceful way. Or in other words, I believe that your body is kind of telling you that you need to be creative. I think that is really what creativity means, like figuring out what the step is that is like the opposite to what you're doing, that makes things better. You know, if you have this concept that there's like opposites all the time and we need to balance the opposites, it's really easy for us as humans to get stuck in one end of the opposite. We really like to just find one solution and then just keep repeating that solution and become comfortable in that solution. But I believe that is where the anxiety can come from. You know, you don't create this contrast, you don't take this new step, and your gut is kind of telling you, you know, you kind of get this anxiety and your body is telling you that you need to go over here and do this opposite thing. And you try to perhaps suppress that feeling in order to just be able to repeat the same pattern and being comfortable. And if you manage to take the step into this opposite direction, then you can feel this joyful energy of life. And then it's really easy to get into the trap of thinking that, oh, I was supposed to be over here, not over here. And then you just keep staying over here, and it feels good in the beginning to just keep doing life over here. But then a new type of anxiety, and that's also interesting, it's not the same type of anxiety, but rather a new type of anxiety start to appear. So you never really find this one place where you can just repeat life and it will be good. You need to always, in a resourceful way, create new contrast all the time. I believe that you need to be creative all the time to create this joyful life. And obviously I don't think it's black and white. It's like sometimes you're in it, you're creative, and sometimes you just repeat things for too long and you don't feel good about it. So it's like this balance that you fall in and out of all the time. And again, on the one side, it can make life feel a bit complicated, but on the other hand, to me, it means that there's infinite creativity.